Okay, hey everybody, welcome. We are back. We've taken a little hiatus from our Insta Lives, but we are now back. It is 1 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, and I am thrilled to be able to bring to you the author, Kat Vellos, who is an incredibly accomplished woman, writer, just professional in 1,000 different ways. And I'm going to let her introduce herself. I don't need to do that for you. But she, what she has done is she has created this really beautiful piece, marketing, etc., in order to, she's really just the master about friendships and talking about things, all things about friendships, how to maintain them, how to initiate new friendships. And I know that this is something that we deal with a lot in the fertility space. One second, I'm trying to grab her here. Let me make sure that she's here. Okay, I think she's here. I think she's here. Wait, oh, she's here.
Hi.
She's here. All good. And so I'm really going to turn the floor over to her. I mean, obviously I'll pepper her with some questions, but as the master of all friendships, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to spend a little bit of time with us today. You talk about friendships in general and relationships and cultivating them and maintaining them and so on and so forth. I'm now repeating myself, but in the fertility space, all of those things, all of those relationships are, there is this overlay with extra added sensitivity. And so I wanted to bring you on and have you talk about some thoughts and tips and et cetera, how to help this community. So please, first of all, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Amy. I'm really glad to be here with you today. You're too kind. I would not call myself the master of all friendships. I think I am a person who has chosen to really give in to my curiosity around this aspect of human connection in a very, very deep way. Certainly, that curiosity led me to write the book, We Should Get Together, which is the one you already mentioned, The Secret to Cultivating Better Friendships. Looks like this for folks who haven't seen it. And honestly, like that came out of my own struggles with adult friendship in the second half of my 30s, where I was like, wow, I noticed this is getting more difficult than it used to be when I was younger. What's that about? And almost every adult I spoke to said they were having some kind of difficulty with friendship as well. And so my curiosity about solving that problem and really understanding that problem deeply was what led me to write the book. And then in the pandemic, very shortly thereafter, I put a very tiny addendum out, which is like the extra chapter of We Should Get Together, which is really about staying connected from a distance, because obviously in the pandemic, we have distance, it's a thing. But I also don't believe that having to maintain some kind of distance means we can't be close, because if that was the case, we wouldn't have long distance friendships and long distance relationships.
Right.
And obviously we do. So that's who I am. That's why I care about this. And I'm really glad to be here with you today talking about the specific challenges that may come up in the scenarios you described around fertility or wanting to connect or having a break from a friend or all these different things that can make things more complicated.
Okay,
I'm going to get a drink of
now,
water. 1 second.
yeah. So what your introduction sort of led me into this line of reasoning or line of thinking that said, when you specifically started on this path of exploration, when you in the as you said, like in your 30s, as you noticed things were starting to be a little bit more difficult. And what I was thinking to myself as you're talking is that the fertility challenges generally are during the fertility years. I mean, that's when it happens. It's basically from your 20s to 40s, plus or minus a bit. And so that directly sort of correlates with everything that you're talking about and have been talking about. And so I guess to sort of start off is what did you discover in this exploration that you were doing that you found was sort of the not the baseline, but more what was the essence of the reason why things became so difficult at that point in your life or in people's lives?
Yeah, so I talk about this a lot in the book We Should Get Together, where I break down what were like the four main challenges that I saw in the research coming out for like what was making it difficult for people to maintain either existing friendships or to start new ones in the years of adulthood you're describing, typically between 20s to late 40s. And there were really four main categories, and they might be things that, one might be really big in someone's life, or it might be they're feeling like a blend, right? This like cocktail of like all four of those challenges. So one being hypermobility, which is the fact that people are moving in and out of cities very quickly, and certainly before the pandemic with like our busy commuting lives, like people were just always on the go, and it's very hard to put down roots if you're always moving, right? Like a rolling
Yep,
stone gathers no moss. Like it's hard to stay connected if you're always leaving town.
totally.
Um, Second challenge being busyness, people constantly feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, I'm so busy, I don't have time for friends, I already am juggling a million bazillion things. The third challenge being relationship and family. Not that relationship and family are a bad thing or that they're a challenge, but the fact is it takes a lot of time to cultivate a new romance or to like build a new relationship or to go really deep in a relationship. And certainly like trying to have a baby, having kids, like all of those things take time and they take time away from the bucket that people maybe pulled from when they were younger, which was their friendship time. And then the fourth challenge being difficulty establishing intimacy. So you might have, quote unquote friends, but it's like stays very shallow. You don't get deep. You don't feel like you can really reach out to them in a time of need. And so not knowing how to get close or not knowing how to maintain depth or to get through challenges together and stay strong was the fourth challenge that people named, not necessarily in those exact words, but it's really
Right.
through qualitative interviews that I discovered like that was actually a challenge. And so those are the four biggest ones they delve into in the book.
And so, I mean, so that it feels like number four is the one that sort of directly relates to the fertility space in that someone's having a challenge or you either yourself or someone else, and either that person doesn't know how to reach out or the other person doesn't know how to make connections when you see someone who's really struggling. It sounds like that's
Mhm.
falls directly in that bucket. Is that would you say that
I
that's
would say,
correct?
yeah, there's definitely an overlap there. And it's not that establishing intimacy is all only a challenge, or only about like going through a struggle. Sometimes it's just like people not knowing what to do and they feel awkward, right? It's like
Right.
they feel awkward, so they like bail. And it's like,
Yep.
well, you've given away an opportunity to get
Yep.
close to a friend.
Yep. Totally. Totally. So I think so let's take a little bit of a dive into some of these questions because I think it'll bring out some of the pieces that I want to try to give over to the community. So
Sure.
one thing that we get questions about this all of the time is you yourself just found out that you're pregnant and you know that someone else is struggling. They're going through infertility, they're not able to have a kid for whatever reason, they've just had a loss, and you feel this like it's the have and the have nots, right? It's the like you have something and you know the other person wants it, but and there's nothing that you can do to give it to them, and you feel terrible about it. And this could play out in a thousand different scenarios, I'm sure, like with jobs, with marriage, with relationships, with money, with a thousand things. And so how do you recommend that people, when they're dealing with a specific struggle and the haves and have nots, I'm calling it, I don't know if that's a term that you use, but it's something that I'm thinking in my head, like, how do you deal with maintaining connection and communication and fostering that in the have and have not situation?
hmm And I love that you also made this relative to all the other scenarios too, right? So like jobs or a relationship or money or whatever it might be. Because like I haven't had a baby, I don't plan to have a baby, but like I can certainly relate, right? And all these different
Yep.
fronts. And what this really speaks to is the need that we have for friendship to be a place where it is okay to bring our biggest struggle and our biggest celebration, and for that to be a non-competitive zone of loving support and to know that there is not a scarcity in the universe that says like because one person gets something that it can't happen for another person. And so I think that there's something really meaningful around having conversation with people to say like, Amy, like I am here to hear whatever it is that you have to share as a friend, let's say. Whether you're going through a tough time, whether you have something to celebrate, I want you to know that I am always have open ears and an open heart to hear that. So if you don't know who to call, you can always call me. And so like making this sort of like general open container for that connection and sharing from a space of open-hearted willingness to hear makes it then more safe and more likely that someone's going to come to you, whether they're having a struggle or whether they have a celebration. Because, I've been in that situation before where like something awesome happens and like maybe you post about it on Twitter or Instagram, but like you actually want to talk about it with one person, but it can feel so strange to be like, well, will it seem like I'm bragging if I tell this person, like, is it
Right.
okay? And
Right.
so it is such a real gift when you actually do know who to call. You actually have that space. And it's honestly only clarified sometimes when someone actually uses their words to say so, which is to say, hey, I know I've never said this to you before, but as your friend, I want you to know you can always call me to say if you have, a crap day or the best day in the world. I'm here to hear it. It's
I,
not
you
going to make
know,
me
I,
feel bad.
I think that that's right. And at the end of the day, you're not preventing someone from feeling that jealousy because you can't. Like you can't
You
control
can't.
someone else's feelings, but what you can, like I love that sort of it's the preemptive, like, hey, I'm here. And having it before the moment happens as opposed to when you're in the moment, so the
Yeah.
person knows that you're safe. You allow them to feel safe and they know that you're safe.
Yeah.
I love that because look, the reality is that life is filled with these kinds of moments, and but there are only certain people who can hold that space for you. And so yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, I guess so, like going deeper into that, what happens when, what are your thoughts and suggestions about when you say something and the other person is hurt by it, whatever it is, and needs to create this sort of distance because they don't know how to communicate the hurt. They might feel these, like, let's take the example of someone who gets pregnant or someone who has the baby and someone who doesn't, right? And the other person is like feeling this, like, oh my god, like I'm obviously so happy for them, but like every time I see them or speak to them, it's bringing up all of these like yucky feelings of the fact that I'm jealous, and really like it's making me feel really uncomfortable because this person desperately has what I desperately want. So how do you move deeper, like move past those feelings to still maintain a friendship that you desperately want in your life?
Hmm. Yeah. And I want to acknowledge too, that like jealousy is real. Like sometimes something happens for somebody else and you're like, whoa, I wish I had that. And all it does is it just illuminates the things that matter to us. It just illuminates how much we care. And it can even motivate us, right? If it's something that we do have any control over, whether it's like seeking out an opportunity in your work life or something, like move in that direction. If it's something that's not in your control, like whether or not you're going to get pregnant, like sit in that space and just acknowledge that like this is something that is so deep in your heart, and you have every right to care as fully and deeply as you do about that. And when it comes to like processing that jealousy, like knowing that you have a multitude of options to do that. You don't only have to do that with this one other person who may or may not be able to hear you, may or may not be in the headspace to hear you. If they are, oh my gosh, what a gift, what a blessing for them to say, I know this might be hard for you because I just got the thing that you want, and I want you to know like I'm here to listen and to support you if you need to vent or you need to get anything off your chest. That's an amazing gift. And you don't only have to process that with that person, right? So you can process that with other friends. You can process that in your journal with your own self. You can process that with a partner. You can process that with a therapist. You can process that in a support group. You can process that in nature. Like there are so many ways to move through that space and to allow yourself. It's so important to feel the things that we feel and to not push them away, but not to feel like too like boxed in with like there's only one person I can process this with, because it's going to be just like a more fragile experience. And so to really allow yourself to say like it is possible to receive support from multiple areas, and it's possible to work through these feelings over time if needed in a variety of ways.
Amazing. I think that it's such a gift. Like what you're saying is such a gift to be able to give to people, and that like we feel like these deep, I'm like thinking about my own life, we feel these deeply like important and deeply powerful and hurtful feelings sometimes with certain relationships. And we feel like, I know I've definitely felt this, where I felt like the only person, like I can talk about it with like my husband, but I need to talk about it with this person because they're the only ones who like I need to tell them how hurt I am and how much they've made me feel terrible. But what you're saying is like, that's not your only way to do it. And there are other ways that you can feel that you're heading down the path of healing, but it doesn't necessarily only have to be in that one way. I think that's so powerful. Um, what, like, now that I'm like thinking more about that, okay, so let's say you're now the other person, right? You're the person who knows that someone in your life is going through something. They're in pain. They're dealing with something difficult. I know that you have, and some of the things that I've reposted and I've reposted it other times of like, you have this like beautiful bingo board of like, 30 things to say, like, ways to say, how are you? Or how are you doing? Or I can't remember exactly the words you use, but I know you know what I'm
Sure,
talking
sure.
about by the way that you're smiling. But that's, I think, the crux of so many different difficulties in relationships, right? Where we feel awkward, as you were saying before. We don't
Yeah.
know how to approach people who are in pain. And so it ends up coming out in this like really like way that makes us feel weird, makes them feel weird. We don't know how to move it forward. We don't know, like, how do you how do we get to a place, how do you suggest getting to a place where we feel comfortable having awkward conversations?
hmm Yeah, I have an entire chapter in the book about dealing with awkward situations because it's a thing
Yes,
and
we,
it's
we
it's a
we
part of
all are
life.
going to buy the book afterwards, but we're getting a slight taste of it now.
Yes, like it's a thing. And, one of the therapists that I spoke to about this particular issue around awkwardness and navigating that gave really, really great advice. And like the first piece of that is to check in with yourself and see if you can find a more specific word to describe awkward, right? He describes how there's like, the spectrum of different emotions. Like, are you feeling sad? Are you feeling shame? Are you feeling excited? Are you feeling uncertain? And there's a chart in the back of the book that's like, really get to know your feelings, like on a light, medium, and strong level. Like, what is the thing that you're actually feeling? And if you can get more specific with what that actual emotion and feeling is, it's easier then to express and it's easier to navigate. And it's also then easier to understand, like, well, when I feel fill in the blank feeling, what I'm needing is fill in the blank need, right? So, like, let's say I am feeling uncertain about how to proceed in this scenario you've described. Maybe what I'm needing is to do some good listening, because if I hear more from my friend, I may then become more clear about how I can show up for them. So maybe what I need to feel less certain is information or like to really, really understand like how someone's doing. And there's better ways to ask how someone's doing than just saying like the broad generic question, how are you? And the main reason why I advocate for switching up the words we use, it's not that I'm saying we shouldn't ask how our friends are doing. I'm saying sometimes it's useful to switch up the words we use because in our culture, particularly in America, we use the word how are you, the words how are you as a greeting, and sometimes we mean it as a question. And
Right.
if you can't tell if someone's saying it as a greeting, it can actually feel really isolating if what you want is for it to be a question, but they actually are just saying, "Hey, how you doing?" And then they're like, they don't really care how you're doing. They're just moving on to the next topic.
Right. Right.
And so if you use different questions, like I had a conversation with a friend yesterday and she said, "How's your heart today?" And that is a beautiful question because it actually implies I do care how you're doing. I do care how your heart is feeling. And you can tell from the tone of that question, I'm ready to maybe do some deep listening. I'm not just asking, like, hey, what's shaking? Which is another way of saying, like, I'm saying hi, keep it brief. But that's really different than I'm saying hi and I want to understand how you are. What's something you're carrying today? What's something
Beautiful.
that has been on your mind lately? These are questions that make it much more clear that we do care very much how someone's doing, and we are in a position of listening and being ready to hear the full, true answer.
Beautiful. I think you're 1,000% like you're spot on, especially in America, but I'm sure in other cultures and other countries as well, right? It's the throwaway, how you doing? And when people actually answer anything but fine or good, we like, wait, what? I didn't ask you that. Like, I'm sorry. You actually told me what I wanted, what I was actually asking you. Wait, no, try that again.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. And the reality is that most people are not thinking about it in that way. They're just like, okay. Like I just kind of was like starting like that. The how you doing was the prelude to the next part of the conversations. And I don't actually want to know how you are.
Yes. And in those situations, I think we shouldn't ask a question. We should make a statement.
Right.
Like, it's so good to hear your voice.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Totally.
You don't have to ask
Totally.
a question. You can just make a statement.
Totally. Right. It doesn't have to be totally. Do you think, I mean, do you find that when, like, as you're advising people and as you know, all of the pieces that you've already written on this, like when people switch it up and then people give you a response back that you don't expect, then what? Like then like,
Then you're in a conversation that's alive. Then you are in a conversation that is real. You're in a conversation where you both get to show up as who you really are. And congratulations.
right,
We should
exactly.
all be so lucky.
Exactly. So so how do you like, in I'm sure that pieces like pieces like this, you know, broken friendships or the concept of like people disappointing you when you really hope that they were going to show up, like how how do you recommend that people deal with those kinds of situations in their lives? Because this happens, you know, again, like we can generalize because this happens all the time in 1,000 different scenarios, but this also specifically happens in the fertility space. And people hold that resentment for a long time because it's deeply hurtful and it's deeply painful, and it really it sometimes creates bitterness. And so how do you suggest, I think, one, internally, the work that you can do to try to relieve some of that angst and feeling bitterness and pain, but two, also then how to approach or not the person who's done this to you?
Mhm. Yeah, good call. Because sometimes you do or don't want to
Right,
go through that conversation. And that's a
right,
choice that we have, right?
right,
And I think that there's not like one answer for every situation. A lot of it is going to be circumstantial on the relationship with that person, how much you really do want to keep that friendship or that relationship in your life. If this is like a pattern, like maybe you're going to reevaluate, like if you're going to keep investing in that connection or if you need to actually put your energy in another direction. And we can't stop the fact that people are going to disappoint us. You know, years and years ago, I had a really great therapist. You know, I was like sharing about something where I was disappointed, and she was just like, yeah, people can be really disappointing sometimes. And I was like, mm-hmm. And like, that's just a fact of life,
right,
right? That is just a
right.
fact. Like, it is
Totally,
impossible to go through life never being disappointed. And if that's the bar you have, I got news for you. You're going to be disappointed a lot. And
totally.
so sometimes we just have to accept that like other people are going to disappoint us. And guess what? We're going to disappoint other people too sometimes. Okay. What do we
Yeah,
do with that? And I think it's meaningful. Like if this is a friendship or a connection that you do want to maintain in your life, it can be as simple as saying, you know, I'd love to have a conversation with you. I've had some things on my heart and I feel kind of scared to like say this or to broach this, but it's important enough to me that our friendship is a place where we can be open and honest with each other. And I'm wondering if I can process some things with you. If they're
wow,
like, sure, let's pick a nice time where it's like we're not going to be interrupted. Like, how much time do you need? Like, when's a good time that we can both feel like really centered and, you know, not distracted? Make that happen. And if instead they're like, you know what, forget it, you're too complicated, I don't want to deal with your drama, that's a good sign that like that's probably not someone who's able to hold the
right.
friendship in the same way that you do.
Right.
So,
And I think that what you're saying speaks directly to, so there's someone who put a question here in the comments, which I think
mhm.
is directly related to this. She's saying, I have a person in my life that I love dearly. I feel like they always find a reason to be upset with me. And I often feel like I have to walk on eggshells when speaking to them. Advice.
Hmm. Have you had a conversation with this person about that yet?
Right.
That's like the first question I'd wonder. And I don't discount the significance of that feeling, right? That feeling that it sounds like this person is feeling like this constricting vibe, right? When they're with that person or interacting, like they feel like they have to make themselves smaller or uh, conform into some shape that's not them. And it doesn't sound like this environment of the friendship is a place where they can really unfold and be who they fully are. And so I would say with that, check in with yourself. Is that accurate? This is my interpretation of what you're saying.
Yep.
I could be wrong. Check in with yourself to see like, is that accurate? And then with that, is this a friendship that you believe holds the potential to transform that? Sometimes people surprise us in positive ways and they surprise us with the opposite of disappointment, and we
Right.
can actually have really transformative change through communication, conversation, and commitment. And so, is this a place where you might want to pursue that? If it's not, okay, you have other options then too. Do
Right.
you want to distance yourself from that? Do you want to show up in a completely new way? Do you want to communicate in a different way, or do you want to like turn your attention to something else? So we always have more options than just one.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's like that's a beautiful way to describe really any relationship where you're having any difficulty. Like at the end of the day, the power is in your hands. Like you have the ability to decide whether you're going to keep putting yourself back in that same exact situation. That's your choice at the end of the day. So yeah,
Hmm.
I yeah, I love that. Um, okay, just to be mindful of time and knowing that we're going to close this out in another couple of minutes, as sort of a like we could talk for hours about this, and obviously you've written a whole book and in addition like an addendum to that, which we're all going to talk about and we're all going to have to go purchase. But I if you were to give like your closing parting advice on difficult relationships and people in your life who like you hope that it you want to try to foster that connection and it's somehow been broken for any of the number of reasons that you mentioned in the beginning, either a distance or, and now I'm forgetting the other four, but I'm thinking about distance and hypermobility and all the other pieces. Like
Yeah.
we think in today's day and age, because of social media and because of the fact that we each have a communication device in the palm of our hands. So, on some level, it's easier to be in contact with people, but not
Hmm.
necessarily in that meaningful way. So, the question is like with these difficult relationships and in these difficult scenarios, how do you recommend we all try to move through this and try to have more meaningful relationships in our lives?
Well, the first thing I'd ask is, what is it that you mostly want to grow? When we think about connection, like it's a beautiful concept, it's a beautiful word, it's certainly the foundation and purpose of my work, but we can also get more specific, right? So if you get the connection that you want, then what? Like what will happen? What will grow in your life? Will you have more like heart-to-heart talks? Will you have more spontaneity and play? Will you have more like collaborative projects? Like, what are the things that you actually want to grow out? Like, what are the fruit of this connection tree that if it grows and it prospers, like what will you get? And then if you can clarify the thing that you're actually reaching for and acknowledge your role as like the planter, the gardener, the farmer, the co-creator of that, like what are the steps that you can put into practice to help create like this beautiful garden bed where that thing can grow? Who are the people you can invite into that process with you so that collectively it's not like one person's job to make a connection, it has to be collectively, it's like a mutual act of commitment. What are the invitations then that create that space where you can join together and both grow the fruit that you want to eat? And so when we think about it that way, I feel for me at least, it becomes less of a daunting challenge of like, oh my gosh, how do I get this like mysterious thing that's out there? I don't know what I want. It's like get clear about what you want and then create like a really compelling invitation that like is really warm and invites in the people to your life. They may be people that are already there that you are going to be engaged with you in a new way, or it might be new people that you haven't even met yet. but to create that space to say, this is what I'm building. Do you want to do this too? Here's how, like, let's do it. Here's what I have in mind. Tell me your ideas too. And then really let it be a co-creative process.
Well, right, because we all know relationships are not one person. There have to be, you have to have two people. You always have to have two people. So I, uh, I I'm just feeling this overwhelming sense of gratitude and warmth, knowing that you're that you've been doing this work and really trying to connect people through your work and trying to help build better friendships, better relationships, better communities. I think that like at the end of the day, that's what the human experience is about, right? We're not meant to be solitary. And like we could go back to, we are a Jewish account. This is a Jewish nonprofit, but the concept of going back to the beginning of Genesis, the Adam and Eve concept, like at the end of the day, Adam needed a partner. Like, yes, okay, we could talk about man, woman, whatever it is, but man was not meant to be alone. Like, man was not meant to be alone, and that's effectively what you're doing with this work. And I think that it's so relevant for all people, but specifically this community, in that people feel so isolated and splintered from others. So it really, you've given us a good snippet, really some wonderful takeaways here. So I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation to have this conversation today and to use these devices, right, that we use every single day, these communication tools, to be more than just, a passive scrolling tool. Like, let it also serve as the catalyst to help invite in to your own lives, the kind of conversations folks want to be having, the kind of experiences you really want to create, so that this is just a tool along a path of like much deeper, richer kinds of bonds as well. So thank you for having me here. This has been really fun, and I hope it's been helpful for the folks who are out there listening. I love the comments and the things I'm seeing down below, and I will also check in the comments afterwards to answer any questions folks may
Amazing. And this will get saved. We all know how Instagram sometimes gets a little funny. This will get saved, and we'll post links to your account and links to your book so that people can purchase them if they want to. I mean, I know I am. So anyway, Kat, thank you so much. And okay, everybody, you know where to find her, but we'll make sure you have the links afterwards. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.